はい、皆様お待たせいたしました。本日、13時50分から15時20分までのセッションでして、グローバル基準のコンプライアンスと日本市場の展望ということですね。この本セッションでは、カンナビノイドヘンプ事業者が直面する最もクリティカルな課題であるコンプライアンスですね。コンプライアンスについて焦点を当ててお話をしていきます。で、今日はですね、国内外で検査のトッププレイヤーがここに集結してますので、私も事業者としてお客さんでもある立場としてですね、親烈なご質問も投げかけながらですね、これコンプライアンスの担保をするためにはどうすればいいかということをお伺いしていきたいなと思いますので、皆様も途中ですね、ご質問の時間も設ける予定ですので、ご質問ありましたら、はい、その際にご用意お願いいたします。で、まず初めにですね、今回始める前ですね、本日、在日リトアニア共和国大使館のオーレリウス・ジカ様が、ご来場いただいております。ご挨拶いただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
So, ladies and gentlemen, ご来席の皆様、こんにちは。So, first of all, I would like to express my appreciation for inviting me to this wonderful event. And actually, I think this event is very, very relevant and very timely. The very relevant is the topic itself about the industry of hemp, but also about the compliance testing and certification. So, as we know very well, the hemp industry has been growing very quickly during the last decade. Actually, 1 decade ago, we still had very small agricultural sector. But nowadays, it's already global market, very much connected to food industry, to health industry, to cosmetics, and also to sustainability problems. So actually, this very fast growth, it gives us many opportunities, but also it gives us many challenges and issues to solve. I think that Lithuanian case, the case of Lithuania is very interesting, actually, because it illustrates very much about the growth of this hemp industry. As you might know, actually, Lithuania, we have very long tradition of hemp industry, continuing for hundreds of years. And our national cuisine, national textile is very much based on hemp, actually. My wife still, when she is cooking traditional Lithuanian foods, she's using hemp seeds, for example. However, and also it's very important to mention that actually in Japan, hemp is also a very important part of the culture and continuing already for millennia. So, however, during 20th century, hemp industry was demonized, it was destroyed, and now it's starting to grow again. In the case of Lithuania, actually, we are producing plenty of hemp products, and actually Lithuanian government is putting plenty of efforts to develop this. So in 2019, Lithuania became the second country by hemp production in EU after France. In 2022, we doubled the production, the hemp production doubled the German case, and Germany is known as the major actor in EU. So, and we are very much proud about that. So Lithuania nowadays is exporting plenty of CBD products and hemp products to all the world actually, and Japan is a very important market for us. Therefore, I'm very glad that we have 2 companies participating in this event, and actually BioSeed is here. Actually, we also have Sana Biotech. And these 2 companies are they are not only mere importers of hemp products from Lithuania to Japan, but they also contributing to academic research together with Japanese partners. And I think it's a very good example of academic and business cooperation together. So, going back to our topic today, compliance is at the heart of trust in this industry. It makes sure products are safe, standards are fair, and public and authorities can have confidence in how the sector operates. And of course, the rules in different countries are totally different, but I think this kind of discussion and sharing our insights and opinions could lead to some new solutions. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you very cozy, very productive, very fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
オーレリウス・ジーカ様、ありがとうございました。でまずですね、コントロールユニオンの、ステファン・モレス様からご紹介をお願いいたします。
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing Control Union, which is a certification company. We are very much involved in audits and on-site visit of facilities. So what I'm going to be talking about today is basic GACP or good agricultural and collection practices, which is kind of guidelines coming from the EU, WHO, and which has an impact on how it is all produced and in a safe environment. So let's start first with a quote. If you think compliance is expensive, then try non-compliance. Compliance is often seen by people as too much cost. We need to invest in people, we need to invest in training, new facilities, SOPs, but that's of course coming at a cost. But if you don't do that, then you're exposing yourself to major risk. Your product can be rejected, needs to be destroyed, so you can imagine all the losses coming with this kind of situation. So don't overlook compliance. So maybe some background about Control Union so you understand why we are relevant in this industry. So we are a Dutch-based company founded in 1920, so more than 100 years ago, and we do have offices in more than 80 countries. We have 6,000 people and we do operate and we do offer 4 core services. We do inspection or quality control, we do audits, we do collateral services and industrial inspection. And we do that in all the industries. So we are not industry specific, but we're talking about agri, biomass, biofuel, aquaculture, minerals, whatever. So that gives us a really wide and deep understanding of agricultural products should be produced in a safe environment. So why do we need a standard? So why do we need a standard? Well, if you look a little bit back in the history, in 2019 when in the US the rules start changing in different states, we saw a lot of scandals. We saw products being contaminated with pesticides, heavy metals, microbiology issues. We also saw facilities growing in non-licensed area. So all of that led to issue and a lack of trust in the compliance of those cannabis companies. Now, I'm based in Thailand. Thailand, as you might know, has been involved in the industry for the last 5-6 years. And they changed the rules, but we're going back and forth. They've learned their mistake, they're focusing on how they can improve that, and they go back to full medical purposes. But there's still a gray area. So how can we solve that? Well, there is a need for a standard. Well, it's a new market, still in development. There is no real industrial or national standards in places. The end consumer are often people at risk, so they need to make sure the product they are consuming is safe. So there's inconsistency as well from batch to batch production, so having a consistent approach is a must. So what did we do is we created our standard, which is called CUMCS, and it stands for Control Union Medical Cannabis Standards. We also have the IMC GAP, which is for the Israeli government, and we also have basic GACP, as I was mentioning. So what did we do? So we didn't reinvent the wheel, and I think the industry shouldn't do that. We should look at what is already established, what is available. So what we did is we looked at the WHO guidelines, we looked at the EMEA guidelines, and we also looked at what the Dutch government was doing. As you all know, the Netherlands have been long in this industry as well, always not in the right side of the industry, but they have some experience. So we looked at that and we came up with a standard. So what is the standard about? So what is the standard focusing on? Well, we make sure that people are properly trained and know what they are doing, regardless of their activity in the facility. We make sure that hygiene is very important. Building and facilities are properly set up. They use right equipment, good seeds and propagation, and also good harvesting and cultivation process. We also look at the primary processing, the packaging units, the storage and distribution. We need to make sure everything is under control. Proper documentation and SOPs, safeguarding of the material. Of course, those are heavy, regulated products, so we need to make sure there is proper security in place. And I think 2 of our panelists will talk more in depth about that, but lab testing as well, which is really important, and which is the key to ensure the product is safe to be consumed, regardless of the form you consume it. So how does it look like in practice? For CMCS and GACP, it's for all type of production. So not only for indoor or greenhouse, but it's also for outdoor production. IMC, it's only for greenhouse and indoor, as the Israeli government has set a high standard in that. Audit frequency, well, depending on the standards, we will come 3 times per year, 2 times per year, or only 1 time. But the key thing as well to ensure proper traceability is we use what we call transaction certificate, meaning that we can trace every time that a product or a batch has been sold and is changing or exchanging hands. So I'm going to skip that one. So what are the audit steps? So usually, how does it work? We come on site, we do an opening meeting where we explain how the process is going to work. We do a management interview, we do a facility tour, we check the SOPs, look that people are interviewed and know what they're doing, and we finish with a closing meeting. So what are the common findings and mistakes? Well, personal hygiene is a key issue we found often. People do not clean their hand properly, they don't have the proper PPE, and they can expose themselves to contaminated the different product. Lab tests, they do not cover all parameters, so people try often to find a shortcut. Oh, I need a lab test, so I will send only 1 or 2 parameters, but they don't cover the full scope. Water irrigation, well, the water should also be tested, because as you know, it's an agri-product, so they need water to be cultivated, and we need to make sure this water is not contaminated itself. Yeast and mold monitoring, of course, we know that as an agri-product, it can be affected by the environment around, so we need to make sure that there is no risk of mold and yeast. Also, recall procedure, so we see often companies do not have such procedure in place. And what does it mean? If there is some issues found in one batch or a package, the company should be able to recall this product and for all the ones which have entered the market already. So what do we see? That there is a global interest. It's not really country specific, it's guidelines and it's applying regardless of where you are. So we did contribute to developing the Israeli standard with the government there. So we have also developed, as I was saying, the CMCS. The first farm was certified in 2018 in Israel. Then we have now more than 60 companies certified all around the world. So as you can see on the list, you have in Uganda, Lesotho, Colombia, Greece, Israel, Thailand, New Zealand, and I name it and more. So why should you see us as a partner? Because as I mentioned, we have a track record in setting up national standards, the Israeli government. We have local teams, so we can support at lower costs, and we have an ease of communication. We do have dedicated team members who are only and exclusively focusing on cannabis. And we have extensive knowledge on agri standards, so global gap, for instance, organic, sustainability, which are all at the end of the day related and come back to the same thing. So why do we need a standard in the industry? As I mentioned, it's a new industry. People try to find shortcuts. But if you look around, agri products are heavily regulated on other programs, so organic, food safety. So why should the cannabis industry or the hemp industry be different? So that's why the industry should come together with the idea to set up a real industry standard. So what else as well? So of course we were focusing on the medical purposes, but as we all know, and as it was said in the opening speech as well, hemp has so many uses that's not only medical, but also for the textile, for the building or the construction. It also can be in the food, non-wovens, and plastic as well. So we see that this agri plant or agri product has such a wide use and yeah, it can be used in different ways. So not only on the medical field. So there are also standards in those industries. So I'm not going to go into the details because I'm already over time. But we have the global recycling standards. So that's mostly for textile and garments. And we also have ISCC, which is more related to the plastic industry. And so we see that those industry already regulated heavily. You have standards. So why should we not apply the same reasoning when it comes to medical purposes? So that concludes my quick presentation. So it was really to highlight the fact that compliance should not be neglected. I know people try to avoid that as much as possible, because as I said again in the beginning, it costs too much money or too much time. People want to find a shortcut and they want to reach the market quickly. But don't underestimate that if you have non-compliance, your product will never reach the market. Thank you very much.
はい、続いてはですね、KCA ラボラトリーズのライオン・ベローニさんにご紹介いただきます。よろしくお願いします。
So there's a couple labs here today, so I'm going to go over a few things and let Enresco talk a bit more about the specifics for the Japanese market. First of all, my name's Ryan Ballone. I'm Commercial Director of KCA Laboratories. We're a laboratory out of the United States in Kentucky. Started 6 years ago as a hemp laboratory in the U.S. Kentucky historically has been a very hemp-focused state. Even going back 150 years ago, was the hemp production center of the United States. And so we've been a proud people in Kentucky with the hemp industry, and unfortunately prohibition killed that industry, as was mentioned earlier. And just back over in 2018 is when the Farm Bill allowed hemp to occur, which allowed us to enter the market. So that's our laboratory in Kentucky. We are licensed by the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. We're also the first medical cannabis testing laboratory in Kentucky, which just started this year. And we'll be testing the first medical cannabis sample in Kentucky next week. We are accredited by PGLA for ISO/IEC 17025, which is a testing laboratory calibration company accreditation standard. We are DEA registered as a hemp laboratory. There's a requirement in the United States to be registered with the Drug Enforcement Agency. And we're registered with the Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, recognized as a cannabis laboratory amongst a few others around the world. So we gained some notoriety in the market as the first laboratory in the market to test for HHC, which was actually in Japan, let's say 4 or 5 years ago at this point. We're the first laboratory also to commercially test for Delta-8 THC byproducts. We have about 2,100 clients across 30 countries at this point, testing about 50 tests a year across maybe 12,000 samples or so. And what sets us apart was we test for more than 70 cannabinoids at this point. The DEA registration allows us to be handle Schedule 1 through 5 drugs, which include a number of cannabinoids that have reference standards made. To the right there, you'll see an HPLC chromatogram, which is an output for analytical testing in cannabis. So I'll touch on what is testing and why we do it. We focus on testing as a need, a requirement by the government, but really it's important to understand that testing, when used correctly or advantageously, is a good tool for understanding your material, understanding operational efficiencies, keeping people safe. The idea is to profile the material through HPLC, GCMS, LCMS testing, and then test for safety for a variety of different substances I can touch on here. In the United States, it's much more prevalent to test for contaminants such as heavy metals, pesticides, residual solvents, microbials, mycotoxins. It's something here in the Japanese market that I expect to come sometime in the future, hopefully, with the primary focus being here in Japan, the profiling of the material itself, typically by HPLC or GCMS for the majority of the highly concentrated cannabinoids, or by LCMS for low concentration testing. And I'll let Zach mention the Japanese regulations and talk specifically about that. So yeah, we use an HPLC, which is a typical instrument in botanical analysis. We test for about 20 different cannabinoids on there, but we also use GCMS, which we've come to find achieves better separation of cannabinoids for more specific identification of what's in the material. Coming from the hemp industry in the US, there's a number of cannabinoids that have made their way into the market because of chemical isomerization or even just a synthetic creation by laboratories in the US and outside the US. So we made it a mission long ago to help identify these materials, help people understand what they're consuming, what they're selling. And GCMS is by far the ideal instrument in our processes, given the separation that we can achieve. So you'll see here, again, some output for analysis of cannabinoids, testing of delta 8 THC on the left by HPLC. The idea in analytical chemistry is to separate cannabinoids from each other, identify and then quantify if you're quantifying. So ideally, each of these peaks should be by themselves so that you're only identifying and quantifying one substance. The unlabeled peaks here are unknown, so there's still plenty of unknowns in chemical analysis of cannabis and hemp. And then on the right side is a GCMS chromatogram where you can see that there's much more space between those analytes, allowing us to ensure that we're identifying and quantifying a single substance. This is part of my other presentation for later. So Stefan spoke about certification and the need for certification, the need to build trust in the industry. You understand that C of A's certificates of analysis are commonplace in industries where human consumption, animal consumption, or differences in chemical materials are necessary. In addition to the certifications that control unions offering, in the United States, GMP is well known in the dietary supplement industry and pharmaceutical industries for helping ensure quality of those materials and holding manufacturers to guidelines where reproducible materials can be made, safe materials can be made, and recalls can be performed. As I mentioned earlier, certificates should be used to achieve operational efficiencies beyond just meeting regulatory requirements, so that you can understand the material, understand how to formulate with that material, understand if your processes are meeting specifications. And I recommend hosting your certificates of analysis on your website for full transparency. I'll touch on in a later talk about when testing should occur, but I think it's important to mention in every talk this weekend that not enough testing is being performed. Really, anytime material changes hands, the phrase is trust but verify. So you should trust your supplier, but also verify that what you're receiving is indeed the material that you intended to purchase. And testing is really the only way to ensure that. So with that, I'll leave you to the next panelist, and appreciate your time.
ありがとうございました。じゃあ続きまして、ヘンプ協会の佐藤先生、よろしいでしょうか。
My name is Professor Hitoshisato from Japan.
佐藤先生、英語でしたね。
英語か。
英語はこっち。
あ、そう。違うの。じゃあ両方言おうかな。はい、日本語と英語。
じゃあいらないかもしれない。いらないかもしれない。
My name is Hitoshisato, Dr. Hitoshisato from Japan. I've been working in Showa University in Tokyo for 25 years, and I just retired this March. I'm now adjunct professor in Mahido University in Taiwan, and in Japanese university too. And by myself, I set up the Japan Industrial Hemp Association about 5 years ago, and I've been working on the guideline for development and the supporting of the CBD-related businesses in Japan. Right. 日本語で言わなくていいですよ。大体わかりますよね。外人の人の方が多分多いっていうか前の方にいるんで。I also set up, since I have the NAGORIC license in Japan, I've been assigned as a NAGORIC license researcher in Japan. So I set up the domestic analysis center, research center in Japan for cannabinoid. And in Mahido University, I recently set up the innovation center for research, cannabinoid research in Mahido University School, Faculty of Pharmacy. Yeah. So in Mahido and in Japan, I bought the HPLC PDA method, photodietary method, and I'm also working on the CMS for the simultaneous, both both HPLC and LCMS, depending on the customer's requirement. Since I'm a researcher, I'm not the professional, measurement business people, but so my preference is not to just measure and just return the results, but consult with the good products in Japan, developing the good products in Japan. Of course, to avoid the THC contamination or the conversion of CBD into THC should be avoided. So I have been doing the consultation, the recipe development in Japanese manufacturers of CBD or cannabinoids, and we have a lot of additives, research of the additive influence on the CBD to THC conversion. We have lots of testing so far, so we suggest the manufacturer not to use the particular compounds or additives inside the products. Yeah, and then the 3 years storage, shelf life, for example, we have the manufacturer should guarantee the stability of the CBD with the very low level of THC contamination in Japan, very low THC. 10 ppm for the ingredient and 1 ppm for the food products and 0.1 ppm for the beverages. Yeah. So my major role is to help support companies to make the very the good CBD products without the conversion or the impurity contamination anyhow. So the customers often come to my laboratory, and I will show directly in front of them. They brought me the sample, so I will directly measure in front of them. No secrets. Yeah, I will show the pre-treatment procedures, and I will inject or using the sampler, and then there's a peak generating. Then I will show which one is. This is the CBD, CBGA, CBGA, or CBN, or something like that. Yeah. But ということで目の前でですね、in Japanese, I will briefly explain. 目の前で依頼者が来た人には日本 CBD 分析センター今銀座に作ってますんで、そこに島津のエキクロの PDF をですね、フォトダイエダーレ法の一番精密なやつがありますんで、それを使って、目の前でも場合によっては持ってくるんですね、委託者がね、もう目の前で測ってほしいと。つまり取り違いとかミスがあって困るんでね、ヒューマンエラーがね、それで自分で見たいんで、結果も全部見せてほしいってことで全部見せてます、それは。だからそれで場合によっては3つ4つ、同時に全部測っちゃいます、その場でね。それでこれはダメですよと。でも日本の場合、ただ厚労省との約束があって、もし THC が出たら厚労省に報告しなきゃいけないんですよ。There is promises with the Japanese government that if we detect the THC, then we have to report the presence of THC in the product to the regulatory agency. And then, but in the case the client will be in trouble, of course. So in that case, I used the research laboratory in Thailand, yeah, which I have already established using the HPLC PDA and the LCMS methods. Yeah. So since I'm the researcher, I always, try to improve the product's quality. Yes, anyhow. ということで、Thank you very much.
はい、佐藤先生ありがとうございました。続きましてはですね、グリーントレードジャパンの佐竹さんもよろしくお願いいたします。
グリーントレードジャパンという会社の、事業部の部長をやらせていただいております。弊社はザックさんここにいるんですけど、バイオシートさんの原材料、契約させていただいて日本で流通させている会社になります。さっきもお話ししたのでこれぐらいでもう次の方に振りたいと思います。じゃあザックさんお願いします。
I guess my visit was too spontaneous to have a presentation of the USB stick because it was just really last minute. My name is Joseph. I'm from Lithuania, as we heard from our ambassador, representing BioSeed, which we started 8 years ago. And fast forward 8 turbulent years and we're here in Japan. And now sitting with enthusiasts who believed in cannabis and hemp products from day one. Roger, like Sato Sensei, and many others that I met today and probably will meet tomorrow. Just really briefly, what we do, we started working, and we is the team behind BioSeed, it's not myself. We started with working with hemp in 2014, when just the first wave came over from the US. Hemp became cool, and people started figuring out how to cultivate it, how to harvest it, what to do with the stock afterwards in the field, how to process into cannabinoids, into cosmetics, and so on. And then we started facing huge problems in Europe in 2015-16. All the problems we will probably also talk about today. Compliance problems, testing problems, and a lot of bad actors entering the industry. I've seen fake COAs, I've seen all the removing the logo, removing the name, and all that stuff. And this is when we shifted with the core team and we started BioSeed. And we started with a mission to do it better. We saw what's happening and we started to do it better, so we control the cultivation process, we cultivate ourselves, we harvest ourselves, we extract ourselves, we do everything, so full vertical integration. And over the years, we gathered all the necessary certification, so we ISO 22000 and HACCP for food supplements. We have ISO 27716 for cosmetics and EU GMP for the cannabinoid dial for the pharmaceutical. Also, we have HACCP, which we need for some certain markets, and overall ISO 9001 for quality control. So, yeah, we've been trying to work with our partners in the hemp industry in Japan for a very long time, and we are very proud of the achievements that we made together and where we are today. And even though it's very turbulent times, a few weeks ago, new ban on new cannabinoid, and it's all the same story happening again. So, but yeah, let's hope that this conference and many more conferences to come will bring us even more together as an industry, because we need to provide more reliable data, more research, more open talk also. And I really hope maybe next year some of the officials from the government will be here listening to all of this, because I believe sometimes they don't even understand what hemp is and what cannabinoids can do. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございます。続きましてですね、アンレスコラボラトリージャパン、ザックさんお願いします。
I'm Zachary Eisenberg. I'm with Amresco Laboratories. We're an analytical laboratory based in San Francisco. So I actually wasn't, I also didn't prepare a presentation, but I did have some slides shared that I think would be applicable to this event and hopefully will be informative. So Amresco was founded over 80 years ago by my grandfather, so it's a family-owned and operated laboratory. Now in its third generation. We're headquartered in San Francisco. We have a location in Los Angeles, and we're partnering on a third laboratory in New Jersey. For the majority of our history, we've been operating in the food and beverage industry. So we've historically done a lot of food import detention testing, basically testing high-risk food products as they're brought into the US. So as a result, we've actually been an MHLW registered laboratory for, I believe, about 30 years. And then we've been performing cannabis and hemp testing for about the last 10 years or so. Cannabis testing within the California DCC framework. Hemp testing, we're registered in a number of states, including Georgia, Colorado, New Mexico, and soon others as well. In the cannabis side of our business, we're active members of the American Council of Independent Laboratories. It's a trade organization that represents the independent laboratories across a number of different industries, environmental, food, cannabis. I co-chair the cannabis sciences section. So we have many of the same certifications, qualifications that KCA has. We are DA registered, our lab's ISO 17025 accredited, and we are licensed or registered in a number of different states. So as part of the American Council of Independent Laboratories, that's, again, not every lab in the country operates within, as a member of ACL, but those that want to act collaboratively to develop and improve standards. Many of them, including KCA, are members. So we have worked on various initiatives, such as developing a guideline to best practices for cannabis and hemp laboratories. And we have very specific appendices for what are best practices for each of the individual analyses. So in the United States, it's not always just testing for cannabinoid content, but sometimes you're looking at heavy metals, pesticides, pathogens, residual solvents, and other contaminants. And so we've worked very, I think there's a 67-page document that we developed, and it's always, we always have to iterate on it because testing requirements change. There are always new contaminants of concern. And for example, in Japan, what qualifies as hemp is very different than what has historically qualified as hemp in the United States. So now we have to work collaboratively to try to harmonize in terms of best practices for that testing. Okay, I think I'm gonna skip that page too. So the TACPC residue limits in Japan are extremely strict, stricter than any other country in the world. And you're looking at thousands of times lower action limits than would have historically applied to industrial hemp in the United States. You're looking at 10 ppm for oils and powders, 0.1 ppm for water-soluble solutions, and 1 ppm for other types of products. That being said, we also have customers that, even if they have an oil or powder, they want to test down to a 1 ppm limit. This is extremely challenging analytically. We're using mass spec instruments to do so. And inherently, when you're looking at such low concentrations, there's going to be variability, both in the analysis and perhaps even within batches of products. So we're constantly going back and forth with our customers, trying to isolate issues and help them improve their processes. So even when you're looking at an action limit that low, oftentimes you have to set your LOQ or your LOD lower than that because there's going to be variability, especially close to your LOD. So if you're looking for 1 ppm and your LOD is 1 ppm, even if the product is actually 1 ppm, sometimes it's going to be higher, sometimes it's going to be lower. So analytically, you have to test lower than that to have a deal of assurance that what you're reporting is accurate. So to sort of wrap it up, because I think this presentation will get into other areas that are not so directly applicable. Through the ACL, KCA and RESCO and others are, we're working on a round robin, so we'll test identical samples across our labs to see how reproducible the results are. And then we hope to use this data to guide MHLW as they implement their testing requirements and make sure that they're reasonable and achievable and reproducible, and that bad actors are also not participating and making it hard for those that are trying to operate ethically. So, thank you for your time.
はい。じゃあこれね、分析機関の方にちょっと聞いていきたいなと思ってます。検体がですね、全く同じっていう前提ですね。全く同じのものっていう前提であったら、例えば機械や使っている機械ですね。機械によって分析結果が違うよっていうことってありますか？
Yeah, it does depend. Basically, you use each instrument for its own specific purpose. Back when cannabis testing started, everybody, well, most people were using HPLC as we had discussed. There's limitations with HPLC. The main limitation impacting the Japanese market being the sensitivity, being able to test down to those low limits. But then even if you were to test down to those low limits, being able to understand the specificity, which is the identity of that substance at those low levels, you would need to use mass spectrometer to really increase the amount of confidence that you have in your test results. So while HPLC and LCMS may give you the same results at higher concentrations, you may end up with different results at lower concentrations where the LCMS is superior. So it likely depends on the instrument that's being used and the material that's being tested. I'd have something different to say if we were testing a synthetic cannabinoid that contained a number of byproducts, testing on an LC system versus a GC system, for example.
はい、じゃあ次、よかったらそのままお答えください。
Yeah, I would mirror a lot of what Brian says. Resco uses a combination of HPLC and LCMS for our analysis. Again, LCMS is really needed to test for such trace levels of THC and other banned substances. We use HPLC in parallel with that because we believe it's more accurate for higher level concentration analysis. So the CBD, CBN, well, at least CBN until recently, CBG we would be testing using our HPLC analysis, and then for trace level detection, LCMS, we actually have two different methods, so that using different columns and level phases, so that we can be confident in detections, because oftentimes to manufacture an isolate or an oil at such low levels, some means has to be taken to convert the THC that's naturally present in those products, and they may have co-eluting isomers and other issues. So we feel that we have to have at least two methods, and we're developing a third method via GCMS to help with these confirmations, because we oftentimes have customers that are confused, as they're not expecting to have any contaminants, and they may be present at low levels. And we want to be, as sure as we can that we are not inaccurately reporting our results.
Of course, there are some, differences among the machine that you're using, or even the person who are measuring the samples. It depends on the skills or the contamination, avoidance behavior, and very careful skills are necessary. Yes. 非常に機械によって違うというよりも、その測る人によっても変わるんですね。例えばどこでコンタミナが起こるか分からないんで、一回 THC がついたものでまた使ったりすると当然出てきちゃうんですね、次のやつにも。だからシリンジとかフラスコとかね、そういう瓶とかも全部そうなんですけど、全部だからそれをリユースしないでディスポーザブルにしてるかどうかとかね。そういうやり方にもよるんですけど、だから一概には言えないです、はっきり言うと。There are many uncertainties, of course, especially at the level of the 1 ppm or 0.1 ppm, a very low level range, and there is a very wide variations or the uncertainties, depending on the skills or the absorption somewhere inside the machine. 吸着がね、ちょっとでもあると、もうそれでダメなんで。で、あとさらに言うと、I think, personally, I'm suspecting the feasibility of the LCMS, because SMS's case, the electron spray ionization method will add the proton into the CBD molecule, right? In that case, the conversion may happen, yes, especially at the acidic mobile phase condition, yes. So I think even it's very short time for the analysis, but it can be TSH can be generated to a very minor extent, right? SMS 法はですね、ちょっと自分は個人的にはあまり使 いたくないっていうのは、そのイオナイゼーション法ってプロトンをくっつけちゃうんですね。で314の分子量を315にして測ってるんですよ。それで H がプラスでくっつくときに普通の物質だとくっつくだけなんだけど、CB の場合は変換しちゃうんですよ、TC にプロトンがつくとね。で大体モバイルフェーズって移動層で酸性でやってるんで、レシマスのように高エネルギーをかけて、もう相当な電圧かけて無理やりプロトン化してるんで、そこでかなりおかしくなってる可能性があります、正直言って。それはあんまり気づいてないんですけどね。だからもう自ら TC を作り出してしまってるので、逆にレシマスでと高くなることがあります、逆にね。あとはだから要は日本のその基準が低すぎて非常に不確実性な部分でやってるっていうのが正直なところ。自分はだからやっぱり HPLC でやってでどうしてもっていう時しかもう S マスは使わないんですね。かえってクロスコンタミネーションとかキャリーオーバーとかですね、いろんなのあるんです。キャリーオーバーっていうのは前のサンプル打ったやつがまた出てくる、どっかにくっついてて、またそれが出てきちゃうみたいなのがあって、そういういろんな問題があって、だからそれは今度I think there are some, pitfalls of the analytical methods. So in my personal opinion, that we have to make the standard operation procedure, like how to wash, how many times rinse the machine or something like that, and what kind of instrument you use. So this kind of procedure should be standardized, or among the different laboratories. I think it's more feasible. Yeah, because sometimes when the client requested the same samples to the three companies, for example, the three companies show the different results actually. Some companies show that there's a delta 9 AC over 10 ppm, but some companies no. So this kind of thing usually often happens actually, so that the Japanese companies are very in trouble for the consideration of their feasibility of these products. Yeah. ということで、すみません。
Even though we are not testing, but on what was just said, I would think, because we are talking about accredited labs, so the SOP in testing and rinsing and all the preparations is usually probably the same because they're verified processes and testing methods, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, you know it more than I do. So I would challenge the 1 ppm and 0, 1 ppm and 10 ppm limits to be the problem of the testing itself. So that would be my take as a producer, not a tester in this case.
Comment on that. Yeah, unfortunately, something like ISO 17025 typically doesn't dive into the analytical methods. They just want to make sure that you've done validation, that you keep records and follow the same procedure regularly. I think one thing that's worth noting is just the potential difference in the material and environmental factors. Dr. Sato mentioned the mixing with other ingredients, especially acidic ingredients that can affect the CBD and actually the isomerized to THC. Interestingly, in Japan, because of the 0.1, the 1 10 part per million limits, it's kind of a new frontier in terms of analytical testing that is obviously posing new challenges that we're just now, trying to understand. I don't think we quite understand it completely, but ideally we do test the same sample, but even if for example, if somebody tests a CBD isolate 99% non-detect delta 9 THC with us, they use the product, they put it into some MCT oil product, they send it in, and then there's some THC that shows up. The assumption is that maybe the original material was not tested correctly, but potentially what other changes had happened with that material. Was it heated when it was mixed with MCT? Are the fatty acids in the MCT having some effect? And at these so minuscule levels that we're testing at, I think much more testing and studies need to be performed to really understand what's going on.
I think with established industries, there's consensus organizations, AOAC, ASTM, that will develop a method. There'll be a multi-validation study performed at a variety of laboratories, and then it'll be formalized as a method. Right now, because this is such a, again, Ryan is saying it's a new frontier, it's a new type of requirement. There's only a handful of labs in the entire world that can probably test THC with some degree of confidence at these low levels. We're using internally validated methods, and while we use best practices, we're running blanks and QC samples and duplicates. There is going to be some inherent variation in terms of the methodologies and the instruments used by the different laboratories, and those can be contributing factors. And then, as Ryan's mentioned, there's also concerns regarding homogeneity and other manufacturing processes that might be contributing to some of these low-level detections. That's part of the reason why we're working together. While we're competitors, we're also on good terms. We sometimes have shared customers. We want to make sure that there is reproducibility across our laboratories. And so that's why we're members of ASAIL. We're trying to work on these, generate more data, and figure out some of these best practices so we can implement them and also make recommendations to HLW. If it's just not feasible, then they should know that, and if it is, then we should make sure that laboratories are adopting those best practices.
はい、ありがとうございます。さまざまなご意見がある中で、やはり分析っていうものがね、かなりセンシティブで、数字が変わりやすいっていうのはすごいご理解いただけたなと思うんですけど、でここで分かりやすく、じゃあ日本で事業をやりたいんだと。でコンプライアンスを守りたいんだ。で例えばじゃあ、KCA、そして、アンレスコ、そして佐藤先生のところで分析をした結果がそれぞれ違っていたとしましょう。でその違っていた数値がどこかの会社では敷地を超えていた、どこかの会社では敷地を超えていなかったっていう時に何を信じればいいのでしょうか。誰かこちらについてコメントいただける方いらっしゃいますか。
Okay, so sure, there's a difference between laboratories. Let's say one gets 8 parts per million, one gets 12 parts per million. Maybe the difference is the measurement uncertainty between the laboratories. But maybe one laboratory gets non-detect, the other laboratory gets 50 parts per million. Obviously one passes, one fails. I know a lot of clients of ours are testing at multiple laboratories, like Zach said. So is the ideal next step to just use the laboratory that has the passing certificate? That's an option. I wouldn't say it's a good option. But ultimately, the next question would be, is it the same material? There's been some collaboration with Enresco and KCA of testing similar materials. There's going to be more of that to happen. But ultimately, it's a risk assessment. You have to assess, is it a material that you want to import, that you feel comfortable importing, that you feel comfortable making materials with? Because the stakes are high. There's a lot of money at stake if material gets tested and has to get destroyed.
Just really quick, I can tell this from our perspective as a producer. When we ship products, like real case, when we ship products to Japan, no product or ingredient leaves the facility until it has 2 separate accredited lab tests for that batch. So either we send it simultaneously to 2 labs, if one passes, the other one doesn't pass, we refuse the batch for the release, and we remanufacture or make a new one. So that's what we do in order to comply, or at least have some safety, because as Ryan mentioned, the safety assessment needs to be done on our side, and we cannot put our partners in a bad position, but also us as a producer, what we actually achieved over the last 5-6 years.
ありがとうございます。やはりね、複数回しっかり検査をして、やっていくっていうところが、サプライヤーとしての意見もありましたので、やはり、一つの試験っていうだけよりかは多くのものを、多くの回数、サードパーティーでやっていくっていうのは私もすごい大切だと思いました。
One thing that might be relevant for this kind of issue is the transportation delivery period, the temperature that during the period, transferring port period, how much temperature is the products exposed. And this kind of issue should be also considered, I think. Yeah.
郵送特に海外の場合結構
温度上がったりするんですね。
輸送中に
輸送中に、
はい、
そうすると高温になったりすると、それで
変性が起こ
る可能性もなくもなくて、結局日本で測ってなかったのが逆に海外で出ちゃったりっていうケースも結構あったりするんで、そうすると何が本当か分からなくなっちゃうんで、まあ、彼は結構慎重なんで、出た場合はもうそっちの出た方を信用するっておっしゃった。だからそれはかなり慎重な会社で、まあ、彼は、まあ、バウシードさんは非常にコンプライアンスが非常に強いんで、違った時には悪い方を取るみたいな。でもないものはないんで、本当はですね。だから出た場合はむしろ別の理由で出た可能性もあるってことですね。だからそういうのも考えなきゃいけないかなと思う。だからちょっとそれは最終的に違法か合法かっていうのは我々が決めるんじゃなくて、マトリとか警察が決めるんですよ。我々はそれを決める権利はない。だから最終的に向こうがやって出た場合に問題になります。はい、そこだけちょっと覚えておいていただければ。
はい。ちなみに業界からの補足なんですけど、あまりこの PPM を検査されて摘発された例っていうのがおそらく去年の法施行から1件ぐらいしかなくて、なんかその本来どれぐらいなのか、どれぐらいの買い上げ調査をしているのか全く不明、そして PMDA で測っているとは言ってますが、どういう検査方法で測っているのかもわからないまま我々は事業を行っていくので、やはりまあその適切な測り方がないとはいえども、やはり取り組みですね、1個だけじゃなく2個、2個だけじゃなくて3個、1回だけじゃなくて2回っていうように、やはり自分らのエビデンスだったり取り組みを示すことで、まあ、例えば厚生労働省の買い上げ調査があった時も、いやいやこんなにやってるやんかということで、しっかり取り組みを見せて、業界の事情作用っていうのを見せていくことも大切だなと思います。でそうですね、CBD 業界の課題として、やはり分析っていうところもあるんですけど、じゃあ認証っていう部分もあると思っていまして、例えばなんだろう、その GMP 認証を取るとか、なんかその CBD のサーティフィケートをするっていう時に、なんかこれ世界的に例があるのかどうかちょっと僕には分からないんですけど、もしステファンさんの方でなんかこの、日本の CBD 製品のこのサーティフィケートをする、もしくは認証を取るという部分で何かアイディアとかあれば教えていただきたいなと思います。
As I was mentioning, I think it is all a question about perspective, and our companies see compliance. Do they see it as a regulatory compliance, so they go, oh, I have no choice, but I have to comply and get certified? Or do they actually see the benefits of being certified? Because that allows you to penetrate new markets, that gives you a good reputation to your company, because your customer can know, okay, this company has undergone a heavy audits and process, so we can trust the quality of the product they're supplying to the market. So it's really a question of perspective and how people want to approach compliance. And I would say Japan has always had this great image about quality around the world. Usually when people talk about Japan, it's always high quality products. But that's not enough. We shouldn't use that as, I would say, yeah, we shouldn't rely only on that, and we should, I think, encourage companies to go in the right direction. I think now is the right time as well, with things changing. So yeah, that would be my advice. Just don't overlook compliance and take it seriously. And don't see it just as a burden from the government, but just more as added value for your company, your branding. We don't have a client in Japan, not yet, but again, we do have a lot around the world. I think Japan is changing now the regulation as well. Before it was more controlled, licensing was more difficult to get. So I don't have a local example, but I see in Thailand we do have about 15 clients certified, and we see a complete change for them as well. They were allowed to export from Thailand to Australia, to Germany, even to the US, so which they were not capable of doing before because of the lack of trust in those companies before.
ありがとうございます。恥ずかしい話、英語があまり分かんないんで、腹落ちはしてないんですが、多分皆様はご理解されたと思いますので、私も後でしっかり振り返って確認してみたいなと思ってます。そうですね、ちょっとまた原料のことでお伺いしたいなと思ってまして、リトアニアから、原料を日本に入れられて、大量の原料を販売している、グリーントレードさん、バイオシードさんについて聞きたいんですけど、やっぱこの原料を作る中で最終製品の なんだろう、この残留 THC 値ってそのロットバッジによってはある程度変わってくるかなと思うんですけども、やっぱ限りなく少なくするために会社としてどのような努力、そして輸入で受ける側としてどのような努力をされているかお伺いしてもよろしいでしょうか。
多分前提としてなんですけど、先ほど佐藤先生もおっしゃった通り、ここにいるメンバーがTHC、これは麻薬であると決めるわけではない、厚労省がそこは判断することなので、我々がいくらTHC が含まれていない、もしくは含まれているという議論をしても、結局判断するのは厚労省なので、ここで出た結論っていうのはあまり、ここで出すべき結論は、今後厚労省に対して我々がどういうアクションをチームとしてしていくのかっていうことが重要かなと、まずは前提としては思っていますと。でその上で、今THC が、KCA さん、アンレスコさんに出した時に、実際出るんですね。KCA では出ないけれどもアンレスコが出ましたとか、アンレスコでは出ないけれども、KCA で出ましたとか、いろんなパターンがあります。両方で出る場合もあります。なので、それをもうどうするかというと、もう結局は、バイオシードさん、ザックさんに出ましたという、事実を伝えて、これ日本では販売できないのでどうしようか、っていうのを相談をして、販売せずにそれをじゃあ、一回輸入を戻して、ザックさんの方でクリーニングしてもらってまた再出荷してもらうとかっていうやり取りをするしかないので、そこはもう出た結果に対して、それを事実であると受け止めるしかないというスタンスで、運営はしています。
Correct me if I didn't understand the initial question correctly, but how do we deal with the THC issue and how we manufacture basically to these levels that are acceptable in Japan, right? Yeah. So it all comes down to two factors. First thing is, and it's a funny actually one, because in Europe we can only cultivate European genetics that are registered within European catalog, and these are extremely low in THC genetics. We don't have all the fancy genetics in the US and Canada, which makes us not competitive in many ingredients, but we are very competitive when it comes to Japanese specific ingredients. And the second one is because we care. We actually care about the market, we care about our clients here, we care about Japanese development with cannabinoids, and it's not a regular isolate that we produce. It takes sometimes 4, 5, 6 additional steps to clean it basically to the same level, and we wouldn't do it for the European market, we wouldn't do it for our even pharmaceutical requirements. You have to imagine, we have a European pharmacopoeia, and CBD is clearly defined in it as a pharmaceutical ingredient. This is the highest possible quality ingredient that you could produce because you develop pharmaceuticals and manufacture pharmaceuticals out of it. And Japanese requirements are even higher than that. So just give that into the perspective. So since we do both, to sum it up, we really care about it, and we, over time, it's not rocket science, it's just continuously doing the processing and cleaning it up. And a lot of companies don't do that because for them it's not worth it. So, and yeah, this is how basically we do it.
はい、ありがとうございます。そうですね、やっぱり分析する側も当然ですし、やっぱりものづくりをする側、原料を生成する側もそうなんですけど、やはりこの2つの努力が、しっかり重なることで日本用の CBD アイソレートっていうものはできてくるので、これって今ここでいる皆さんは当たり前のように話してくれてますけど、世界中私たちも何百社あれだな、100社ぐらい、100数十社いる中で、やっぱり日本っていう小国のためにわざわざこのTHC を取り除いていくっていうことをしてくれる会社さんも少ないですし、もっと言えばLC マスマスをわざわざ用意して日本のために測ってくれる会社もないので、やはりそういうような取り組みにまず感謝を申し上げたいとともにですね、逆にちょっとそんな日本好きな皆様にお伺いしたいんですけども、なぜ日本の、サプライ、原料で言ったらサプライヤービジネスないし、分析だったら分析ビジネス、そうです、もし認証っていうものがあったら認証ビジネスをやろうと思ったか、なんかそのきっかけみたいなものをちょっと簡単に一言二言で教えていただければなと思います。
Well, for us and for me personally, because the very first time when I met with some Japanese customers, it was back in 2015. At that time was in Denmark, because we were building out a Danish company, and they visited us, went to the fields, and I still remember to this day, the hemp is like 2-3 meters high. They're inside this field and they're just happy. You've never seen it like this before, you know, and it is a magical moment. We always, in the summertime, is the busiest period of the year for BioSweet, because we have visitors all the time going to the fields. Everybody wants to go to the fields, so this is how it all started with my connection to Japan. And then when I came to Japan for the first time, I felt, even though the language is different, the food is different, everything's different, but I didn't feel like not being home. I felt very welcome, I felt very safe, and I felt very accepted. So this gave a very good grounds and understanding of, okay, we can start something here. And you know, we Lithuanians are very hard-working people, like by our heritage and our history. And Japanese are also very hard-working people. So we kind of clicked, and step by step we developed our dynamics. It wasn't always easy, I must admit. It's not all easy with certain steps need to be taken, certain periods of time need to pass until we have a nice cooperation. But it's my 8th or 7th time now within the last 3 years in Japan. And that probably shows how I enjoy being here. I enjoy all the food. I enjoy all the trips that we get to do and to visit with our clients. So it's a mixture. Sometimes I don't even see it as a job to go to Japan. So it's okay, I'm going to Japan. You know, so that makes it way easier to do what we are doing and what my company is doing. And of course, it gives additional motivation when we see the appreciation. We see our customers inviting us, having such an event, inviting us to these events, and having our products on the shelves. Sometimes you go through some department stores and know, okay, there's our CBD inside. You know? So it's a nice feeling. So there are a lot of motivations to move forward.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick that 4 years ago we got our first samples sent to us from Japan, and people were interested here in understanding the materials that were in Japan at the time. This was before the ppm limits and whatnot and the regulations. And I think people in Japan deserve to know what's in their products that they consume and if it's safe for them. Unfortunately, the history in Japan is with cannabinoids is just unknowns, and we don't know exactly what's coming into the market. I think the regulations are still helpful, at least in giving you a framework in understanding the materials coming in. At least the materials should be meeting some specification. 3 years ago when I was at this show, the market was completely different. There was all kinds of cannabinoids coming in, and really everybody was just looking for a non-detective THC on their C of A's. Last year, people were just wondering if part per million compliant CBD was even possible, and this year we know it's possible, and I think, you know, next year I'm excited to see what will happen, and maybe we can answer some of these questions that were being asked today. Next year, I hope we work together to figure that out.
From my side, I think with all the regulation change, I think it is the right time as well for Japan to look into that. When we look at other countries and how the cannabis industry has collapsed and it's pure chaos, I think Japan has the right time to take a leader role here and to show to the rest of the world how it should be done, that is possible. It takes time. It asks efforts and motivation from the entire industry, which I believe the Japanese market is open to this kind of compliance discussion or topics. As I said, based in Thailand, I've seen over the last 6-7 years how things have completely changed, or it was unregulated. It was the wild, wild west with 16,000 dispensaries selling, I don't know what they're selling, but yeah. And it's something that you, of course, do not want to see happen in other countries as well. So they've learned their mistake, let other countries learn from those mistakes as well. Thailand is one example. I think Canada is also something we can widely talk about it. Europe, also some countries. So I think it's really the right time for Japan, and we're happy to support and try to guide the entire industry in the right direction. So that's why we were also always happy to engage those kind of conversation.
I like to joke that we have an Resco Japan office because my wife likes omakase. But in all seriousness, I think the reason why we're doing this testing is because of the Japanese mentality. The cannabis industry in the United States is a complete mess. There's customers are searching for certain results, and if they don't get those results, they'll go to another laboratory and becomes a race to the bottom. This is both with regards to potency inflation and contaminant testing. And Resco is operating on a much longer time horizon than many of the labs that are performing this testing in the United States. And we're looking for a sustainable industry where people care about accuracy and quality. And I think the Japanese mentality is, even if we provide results that are not favorable to our customers, they understand the steps we've taken to confirm that finding. They want to work with us collaboratively. And that's not something that exists in the US industry. So I'm very hopeful that the US industry will change in terms of their mentality, but I'm very thankful that our Japanese customers do have that take, and I hope that we can sustainably grow together.
ありがとうございます。今ね、テクニカルな話もいっぱいさせてもらったんですけど、結局信頼背景、なぜこの人がその仕事をやってるのかってことを理解しないと、例えばトラブルが起こった時にちゃんと対応してくれるのかであったりとか、その仕事の意味、それはただお金を稼ぐためだけにやってるのか、それとも社会的意義を持ってやってるのかっていうのは、多分長期的なコンプライアンスがハードであればあるほど、やはりそういうビジネス的な背景っていうのは私にとってもすごい大事でしたので、今の皆さんの背景をお伺いして、もし分析に出すとき、認証を取るとき、参考になさってみてください。はい。で、あと間もなくね、時間も近くなってきたんですが、今日、すみません、私の拙い司会の中で進めてきたんですが、海外から来られた方も、日本におられる方もありますが、これだけは話させてくれと。これは言っておきたいっていうことがあれば、ぜひお話をお願いしたいなと思います。
今日はこんな日本語と英語が入り乱れた中聞いていただいてお聞き苦しいところもあったと思うんですけれども、ありがとうございます。この状況、日本のこの THC の含有量の状況ってやっぱり世界的に見ても異常な状況かなとは思っています。その異常な状況にもかかわらず、海外から参加してきてくださっているプレイヤーの皆さんには、クレイジーだなとは思いながらもすごく感謝しています。で、この状況を逆に考えると、日本にしか今起こり得ていない状況だと思うので、じゃあこれを解決していけば、仮に世界どこかで我々と同じ状況に追い込まれている時に、我々しか解決策を持っていない状況になると思っています。なので、こういった状況を、SM でいくと M っぽいんですけれども、こういった状況を楽しめる方々と、やっぱり一緒に仕事をしたいと思っていますので、そういった状況でもちょっと話聞いてみたいとか、そういった方々がいらっしゃれば、ぜひ一緒に会話していきたいと思ってます。で、もう一つせっかくこういう集まりがあるので、やっぱり我々 KCA さんに出す、アンレスコさんに出す、いろんなところに出してるんですけど、もう一回どっかが出せば全部でやってくれるようなパッケージ、例えば今日ジャパン、アンレスコジャパンと KCA ジャパンの2人もいるので、じゃあもう両者で同じサンプルをちゃんと分けて、同タイミングでやって、それをちゃんと確実性を両者でチェックしますプランみたいなのをもう作っていただいて、そうすれば我々めんどくさいんですよね。KCA さんに送って、アンレスコさんに送ってって、いやもうどっちかに送れば両方に送ってよって思ってしまうので、そういったのをちょっと今後ご一緒に作っていければなと思っております。よろしくお願いします。
はい、まさにその通りで、さらにそれが安かったらなおいいんじゃないかと思っています。はい、あと他の方いかがでしょうか。
I can just do it in 2 words.
Yeah.
Just keep going. Just continue believing hemp is just beautiful, and just continue what you're doing.
So yeah, we were asked why, you know, we're in Japan and working with Japanese companies. You know, I think that, you know, we have experience, and so what was sought out was the companies in Japan are looking for that experience that wasn't in Japan currently. But I think that experience is growing in Japan, and I fully expect that the market, as long as it continues to grow and flourish and the MHLW allows us to operate, I believe we'll see a much larger market where there's Japanese companies that are doing what we're doing here in Japan. So.
We've touched on a lot already, so I don't want to rehash anything, but you know, I just say that we're looking forward to working collaboratively both with KCA, with our customers and partners, and that hopefully there's a brighter future for the hemp industry in Japan.
I would say also a little bit in line with Joseph, keep up. It's a long journey, there will be obstacles, it's gonna be difficult sometimes, but I think you guys are going in the right direction, so just don't give up, persevere, and I'm sure you're gonna have a bright future for that industry.
今日ですね、1時間半、長いようで短いでしたが、質問を受け付けるなんて最初に言ってたんですが、すみません、質問の時間ございませんので、後で登壇者に見つけて直接ご質問いただければなと思っております。大丈夫？はい。はい。では、ですね、今回のセッションですね、グローバルコンプライアンスっていうところ、ただいまをもちまして、終了となります。ご清聴いただきありがとうございました。